The room smelled faintly of old wood and sunlight streaming through dusty windows. In the corner, a small piano sat quietly, its black and white keys slightly worn from years of practice. The young girl approached it carefully, her fingers brushing against the smooth keys as if greeting old friends. She had always loved the piano. Even when she was very little, the sound of music filled her home, and she felt as if each note spoke to her in a way words never could. Her mornings often began with the soft hum of a melody she remembered from the day before. Sometimes, she would close her eyes and imagine herself in a large concert hall, lights dimmed, and an audience waiting for her to start. The idea of performing for people she did not know made her heart race with both excitement and fear, but the music always seemed to calm her. She knew that every time her fingers touched the keys, she was telling a story, even if no one else could hear it yet. Her family was small but loving, though they did not have much money. Her mother had once played piano herself and recognized the spark in her daughter's eyes. She gave the girl a few lessons when she was very young, showing her simple songs and encouraging her to practice daily. The girl would sit for hours, repeating the same piece until she could play it perfectly. She sometimes stumbled or got frustrated, but she never gave up. Music was more than a hobby. It was a part of who she was. School was not always easy. She was quiet and often lost in her own thoughts, thinking about melodies and harmonies instead of the subjects in class. Some children teased her for being different, but she hardly noticed. She found comfort in the piano, in the way she could express herself without needing words. The keys became her companions, each note a friend who listened and never judged. As she grew older, the challenges became greater. The piano in her home was old and sometimes out of tune. Sheet music was expensive, and there were few local teachers who could help her advance. But she learned to be resourceful. She would borrow books from the library and listen to recordings on the small radio they had. She taught herself techniques by watching and listening carefully, trying to mimic the players she admired. Each mistake she made was a lesson, each success a triumph. Her determination never faltered. One afternoon, her mother brought home a small flyer from the community center. It was an announcement for a local recital, a chance for young musicians to perform in front of a small audience. The girl's heart leapt. She had never played for anyone outside her family. The idea both thrilled and terrified her. Her mother encouraged her gently, reminding her that the experience would help her grow, and that no matter what happened, she was already special because of her love for music. She spent the next few weeks preparing, practicing the piece over and over, memorizing every note and every subtle nuance. Evenings were her favorite. The house was quiet, and she could sit at the piano without interruption. Sometimes the family would gather around, listening in silence as she played. They didn't always understand the music, but they could feel the emotion behind it. She played with all her heart, pouring her feelings into each note. When she finished, there was often a moment of silence before someone clapped, and she would smile, feeling both proud and humbled. The closer the recital day came, the more nervous she felt. She imagined herself walking onto the stage, sitting at the piano, and starting to play. What if she made a mistake? What if the audience didn't like her? These thoughts swirled in her mind, but she also remembered the joy she felt when playing. The love for music was stronger than her fear. She promised herself that she would focus on the music, not the people watching. Finally, the day of the recital arrived. The community hall was small, with folding chairs set up for family and friends. The girl's hands trembled slightly as she walked onto the stage, but she took a deep breath and smiled. She looked out at the audience, many of whom she recognized, and then focused on the piano. The first note sounded, clear and pure, filling the quiet room. Her nerves began to melt away as she lost herself in the music. Each hand moved with purpose, following the rhythm and emotion of the piece she had practiced for so long. She could feel the story of the music unfolding beneath her fingers, and it made her heart swell. She imagined the people in the audience feeling the same emotions she did, even if they didn't know the exact reason for their tears or smiles. She played with everything she had, letting the music speak for her. When she reached the end of the piece, there was a moment of stunned silence. No one moved, as if the music had cast a spell over them. She looked up and saw eyes wide with surprise and admiration. She felt a rush of pride but also a quiet humility. The applause began slowly, then grew louder, and she felt a smile spread across her face. This was the moment she had dreamed of, the moment when her love for music met the hearts of others. After the performance, people came up to congratulate her. Some said they had never heard anyone play with such emotion. Others praised her technique and dedication. She felt overwhelmed by the kindness and encouragement. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering how proud she was. The girl realized that all the hours of practice, all the challenges and obstacles, had been worth it. Music had not only given her joy but had also connected her to others in a way words could never do. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the day and smiled. She understood that this was only the beginning of her journey. There would be more recitals, more challenges, and more moments of doubt, but she felt ready to face them. The piano was her voice, and she knew that as long as she had it, she could share her story with the world. She drifted to sleep with the melody still playing in her mind, feeling a sense of peace and purpose that she had never known before. The young girl's journey with music was just starting, but she had already learned important lessons. She learned that dedication and love for what you do can overcome fear. She learned that mistakes are part of learning and that perseverance brings rewards. She learned that music has the power to touch hearts and connect people. And most importantly, she realized that when you follow your passion, the moments of triumph, no matter how small, can fill you with a joy that lasts a lifetime. From that day on, she continued to practice with even more determination. Each note she played was a step forward, each piece a story waiting to be told. She found inspiration in the world around her, in the people she met, and in the emotions she felt. She knew that someday she would play in larger halls, perhaps even in front of thousands of people, but she would never forget the feeling of that first recital, the nervous excitement, the connection with the audience, and the smile that came naturally when the music flowed through her. The room where she practiced was simple, but it held her dreams. The piano, worn and familiar, would continue to be her companion through every challenge and triumph. And she would keep playing, not just for herself, but for everyone who could hear and feel the stories she told through the music. In those quiet moments, alone with her piano, she felt truly alive, knowing that her journey had only just begun. The days after her first recital were filled with excitement, but also with new challenges. The young pianist felt proud of her accomplishment, yet she could not ignore the nervousness building inside her for the next opportunity. Word had spread about her performance, and she had been invited to play at a slightly bigger event in a neighboring town. The thought made her heart race. She was thrilled, but also worried about whether she could live up to the expectations now placed on her. She returned to her small practice room with renewed determination. Each day, she sat at the piano, running her fingers over the keys, trying to perfect the pieces she had chosen for the upcoming performance. The music that once felt natural now demanded more focus and skill. She worked on every note, every pause, every subtle change in rhythm. Her hands ached sometimes, but she refused to give in. She reminded herself that this effort was necessary to grow as a musician. At school, she faced a mix of reactions from her classmates. Some were genuinely curious and supportive, asking questions about how she learned to play so well. Others, however, seemed to resent the attention she was receiving. She felt a few stares and heard whispers as she walked through the hallways. The pianist tried not to let it bother her, focusing instead on the music that gave her comfort. She knew that criticism or jealousy could not change her passion, but it did test her patience and self-confidence. Her family remained her pillar of support. Her mother encouraged her to keep practicing but also reminded her to take breaks and care for her hands. Her siblings sometimes teased her, but they were proud in their own quiet way. She learned that support did not always come in loud cheers but in small gestures, like a smile from her mother, or a warm meal waiting after long hours of practice. One afternoon, as she prepared for her next performance, a small accident reminded her of how fragile her dream could be. While reaching for a book of sheet music, her hand slipped and she twisted her wrist. Pain shot through her arm and panic set in. She worried she might not be able to play at all for the next recital. The fear of failing in front of a larger audience weighed heavily on her. But she refused to give up. With ice, rest, and gentle stretches, she slowly regained strength in her hand. Each day she tested it, first playing simple scales, then moving to more complex pieces. She learned that resilience was as important as talent in her journey. Her mentor, an older pianist who had noticed her potential at the first recital, visited her at home to guide her through new techniques. He taught her not only the technical aspects of playing but also how to connect emotionally with the music. He explained that every performer carries a story, and the audience can feel that story if it is shared honestly. She listened closely, absorbing every word and practicing with renewed purpose. Her music began to feel more alive, more personal, and she discovered a deeper connection with each piece she played. The day of the second recital approached quickly. This time, the venue was larger, and the audience included more strangers than friends. The pianist felt a mix of excitement and dread as she walked backstage. She overheard conversations, laughter, and the occasional nervous chatter from other performers. Her stomach tightened, but she reminded herself to breathe, to focus on the music she loved rather than the people watching. She had learned that fear could never disappear completely, but it could be managed. When she stepped onto the stage, the lights were brighter, and the room felt more expansive. She noticed the rows of chairs filled with unfamiliar faces, some curious, some critical. Her hands shook slightly as she approached the piano, but she took a deep breath and remembered the first recital, the silence, and the applause that followed. She smiled to herself and sat down, letting the keys welcome her fingers. The first note rang out, clear and steady, and she felt a sense of calm wash over her. The performance began smoothly, but soon she reached a particularly difficult passage. Her fingers hesitated, almost missing a few notes. Panic tried to creep in, but she paused for a moment, took a breath and continued. She realized that mistakes were natural and that recovering gracefully was part of being a true musician. The audience remained attentive, sensing her sincerity and effort. She played with even more feeling now, letting every emotion, joy, anxiety, determination, flow through the music. As she continued, she became fully immersed in the performance. She could feel the story of the music unfolding with each note. Her previous fears melted away, replaced by a sense of purpose. She imagined the audience understanding her journey, even if they did not know the details of her life. For her, every key she pressed was a word in a story she was finally brave enough to tell. When the final note faded, there was a brief pause. Then the applause erupted, louder and more enthusiastic than she had ever heard before. Some people stood, others clapped for several moments, and she felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. Her smile returned, broader and more confident than before. She realized that the music had not only spoken to the audience, but had also spoken to her, affirming her dedication and courage. After the performance, several people approached her to compliment her, some offering advice or encouragement, others simply expressing admiration. She felt a mixture of humility and pride. She spoke briefly to a few, sharing small laughs and hearing stories of how her music had touched them. Her mentor came up to her, clapping softly, and said, "You are growing not just as a player, but as a storyteller." She nodded, understanding that music was about connection as much as technique. Back home, she reflected on the experience. She realized that while success felt wonderful, the journey itself was equally important. Every long practice session, every sore hand, every moment of doubt had shaped her into a stronger, more focused musician. She felt gratitude for the challenges, knowing they were necessary for her growth. Her family celebrated her achievement, not with grand gestures, but with quiet pride and warm meals, making her feel grounded and loved. As night fell, she sat at her piano once more. Alone, she played a few simple pieces, savoring the intimacy of the music without the pressure of an audience. She felt the progress she had made, and her fingers moved more confidently across the keys. She understood that every performance, whether large or small, was a step in her lifelong journey with music. The experiences of fear, perseverance, and joy would stay with her, guiding her in the performances yet to come. She thought about her future, imagining larger venues, more audiences, and the opportunity to share her music even further. But she also knew that no matter how big or small the stage, the connection between her and the piano, and between her and those who listened, was what truly mattered. She promised herself that she would continue to practice, to learn, and to play with her heart fully invested in every note. The second recital was not just a test of skill, but a lesson in resilience, courage, and authenticity. She had learned to face fear, embrace imperfection, and find strength in persistence. More importantly, she had discovered that her music was a voice that could express what words sometimes could not. That realization filled her with a quiet determination to continue, knowing that the journey would be long, but filled with meaningful moments. In the days that followed, she continued to practice diligently, exploring new pieces and experimenting with techniques she had never tried before. She sought inspiration from recordings, from nature, and from the emotions she felt within herself. Every day brought a small victory, whether mastering a difficult section or discovering a way to make a piece more expressive. She knew that mastery was a process, and she embraced it wholeheartedly. The young pianist's journey was evolving, shaped by the challenges she faced and the joy she found in her music. She had grown more confident, more resilient, and more aware of the power of her talent. She learned that success was not just about applause or recognition, but about the courage to continue, the dedication to improve, and the joy of sharing her story through the piano. Each day brought her closer to the musician she dreamed of becoming, and she faced the future with hope, determination, and a heart full of music. The day of the larger performance arrived with an unusual stillness in the air. The young pianist woke early, her mind already filled with anticipation. She could hear the faint sounds of the town waking up outside her window, but inside, all she felt was the quiet tension of preparation. She dressed carefully, making sure every detail was just right, but more than appearance, she focused on the readiness of her mind and fingers. She went through her warm-up routine slowly, letting each note flow smoothly, grounding herself in the music that had always been her safe place. As she arrived at the venue, the scale of the event made her breath catch. The hall was larger than any she had performed in before. Rows of chairs stretched farther than she could see, and the stage was elevated, adorned with bright lights that made the polished wood gleam. Performers milled about, some practicing quietly, others talking nervously. She felt a pang of doubt. She was only a young girl from a small community, facing an audience of strangers, many of whom seemed accomplished. But she took a deep breath, recalling the first recital and the calm she had found once the music began. She reminded herself that her love for playing was stronger than fear. Backstage, she waited with others. Some were talking about their expectations, while others were quietly practicing, their hands hovering over invisible keys. She kept to herself, closing her eyes for a moment and imagining the sound of the piano, the flow of music, and the emotion she wanted to convey. She pictured the audience listening, not judging, but simply feeling what she felt. That vision steadied her nerves, and a small smile appeared on her face. She knew that once she sat at the piano, everything would fall into place. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage with careful steps, her shoes clicking softly against the floor. The lights were bright, and the audience seemed to stretch endlessly. She felt a flutter in her chest, but she ignored it, focusing on the piano in front of her. As she approached, her fingers instinctively found the keys. The instrument, slightly larger and more resonant than her home piano, felt welcoming. She sat down, straightened her posture, and closed her eyes for a brief second, feeling the weight of anticipation dissolve into the music. The first note rang out clearly. It was like a small spark, igniting the flow of the piece. Her fingers moved with purpose, navigating the melody and harmony as though they had a mind of their own. At first, her nerves tried to creep back, causing slight hesitation, but she reminded herself to breathe and focus on the story she wanted to tell through each note. Slowly, confidence returned, and her hands danced across the keys with precision and emotion. Every chord she struck carried her feelings, and she could sense the audience leaning in, captivated by the unfolding music. She reached a particularly challenging section, where the tempo quickened and the dynamics shifted rapidly. Her fingers flew, and she felt the pressure to maintain perfection. For a moment, her mind raced with worry about making a mistake. But then she paused mentally, allowing herself to accept the possibility of imperfection. She realized that music was not about flawless execution alone. It was about expressing something true and powerful. With that thought, she continued, letting the music guide her hands rather than forcing them. The difficult section passed with a mix of exhilaration and relief, and she smiled to herself quietly, savoring the mastery of the moment. Midway through the performance, she felt the full presence of the audience. She imagined each person listening attentively, feeling the emotions she poured into the notes. There were moments of silence in the hall, a shared breath with the audience, as the music spoke louder than any words could. She lost herself completely in the melody, moving from gentle, tender passages to bold, dramatic crescendos, and back again. Every emotion she felt, excitement, nervousness, joy, longing, found its way into the piano, and in that moment, she understood the true power of music. The audience's reaction became almost tangible. She could sense subtle movements, the quiet intake of breath, and the slight shifting of bodies as people leaned forward, captivated by the performance. Each note she played seemed to connect her to the listeners, forming a bridge of understanding between her and the strangers watching. That connection gave her strength and made her fingers more sure, more expressive. She was no longer just playing notes. She was telling a story that was deeply personal yet shared with everyone present. As she approached the finale, she felt a surge of emotion that both thrilled and frightened her. The piece reached its most complex passage, requiring not only technical skill but emotional intensity. Her hands moved swiftly, her heart pounding, but her mind remained focused on the story she was telling. She imagined herself playing for the small girl she had once been, sitting in her modest home, dreaming of this very moment. That vision gave her courage and clarity. Every note she struck carried not just sound, but the weight of her journey, her dedication, and her passion. Finally, the last note lingered in the air, fading slowly as if reluctant to leave. She held her hands above the keys for a brief moment, savoring the silence that followed. The hall remained still for a heartbeat, a collective pause where everyone absorbed what they had just witnessed. Then, like a wave, the applause erupted. It was louder, more enthusiastic, and more heartfelt than anything she had experienced before. Standing ovations came from different parts of the hall, and she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Pride, relief, and joy washed over her, blending into a sensation of pure fulfillment. People began to approach her after the performance. They shared words of admiration, some speaking of how the music had moved them emotionally, others complimenting her technique and expression. She listened, humbled and grateful, responding with quiet smiles and gentle thanks. Her mentor came up to her, clapping softly and saying, "You played not just with skill, but with heart. That is what makes music unforgettable." She nodded, understanding that the compliment was more about the connection she had forged with the audience than about flawless execution. Backstage, she felt a mixture of exhilaration and exhaustion. Her hands tingled from the effort, and her mind replayed the performance in vivid detail. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the long hours of practice, the challenges she had faced, and the moments of doubt she had overcome. She realized that each step, no matter how difficult, had been necessary to reach this moment of triumph. She smiled quietly, knowing that this experience would stay with her forever, shaping her future as a musician. On the way home, she walked slowly, replaying the applause and the feeling of the audience's attention. She thought about the lessons learned, the importance of focus, resilience, and connecting deeply with the music. She understood that fear would always accompany new challenges, but courage and preparation could turn fear into strength. The journey was as meaningful as the destination, and she felt ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that music had the power to transcend nerves, criticism, and self-doubt. That night, she returned to her own piano at home. Alone in the quiet, she played a simple, familiar melody, allowing herself to relax and enjoy the intimacy of the music without an audience. She reflected on how far she had come and felt a deep sense of gratitude for the support of her family, her mentor, and the small community that had encouraged her from the start. The piano, though ordinary in appearance, felt like a portal to endless possibilities, each note carrying the promise of future stories to tell. She realized that the performance had not only tested her skill, but had also revealed something deeper: her capacity to connect, to express, and to touch hearts through music. She understood that every performance, no matter the size of the audience, was an opportunity to share a piece of herself and to create a moment of beauty in the world. That understanding filled her with quiet determination to continue growing, exploring, and sharing her music. In the days following the recital, she dedicated herself even more fully to practice, exploring new pieces and refining her technique. She experimented with dynamics, phrasing, and emotional expression, learning to let the music flow naturally rather than forcing it. Each session was a small victory, a step toward becoming the musician she envisioned. She embraced challenges, knowing they were opportunities for growth, and celebrated each success, however small, as part of her evolving journey. Her journey was no longer just about playing the piano. It was about understanding herself, expressing her emotions, and sharing them with others. She had learned to face fear, to persevere through obstacles, and to embrace the joy of creating something meaningful. Music had become more than notes and rhythms. It had become a reflection of her heart, a language through which she could speak to the world. As she played alone in the quiet of her home, she imagined future performances, larger stages, and new audiences. Yet she knew that the essence of her music would always remain the same: honesty, emotion, and a willingness to share a story. She felt ready to meet whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that every note she played carried the lessons of the past and the promise of the future. In that quiet, glowing room, with the soft light falling on the keys, she felt a profound sense of purpose and belonging, certain that her journey as a pianist was only beginning, and that the music within her would continue to grow, inspire, and connect for years to come. After the larger recital, life seemed to change in small but meaningful ways. The young pianist returned home with a mix of relief, pride, and curiosity about what might come next. She had discovered the thrill of performing for an audience that was larger and unfamiliar, and the experience left her hungry for more. Yet, she also understood that the applause and recognition were only part of the journey. The music itself, the quiet hours of practice, and the emotions she poured into the keys were what truly mattered. Her family noticed the difference in her. She seemed calmer, more confident, and more focused. The tiny gestures of encouragement she had always received felt amplified now, as if everyone around her understood the depth of her commitment. Her mother often watched her practice, sometimes sitting quietly in the corner, feeling pride and nostalgia for the days when she first guided the girl's hands on the keys. Her siblings, though playful, expressed admiration in small ways. A lingering look, a nod of approval, or simply leaving her alone to play uninterrupted. As the days passed, invitations to perform began to trickle in. Some were small community events, while others were opportunities to play in slightly larger venues. Each invitation brought a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The young pianist knew that every performance would be a test, not just of her technical skills, but of her ability to connect with people through music. She practiced with care, choosing pieces that resonated with her emotions and suited the audiences she would face. Every note became a reflection of her feelings, a small piece of her story to share. During practice sessions, she experimented with expression and interpretation. She realized that playing the correct notes was only part of being a musician. The way she shaped the sound, the timing of pauses, and the emphasis on certain notes could change the emotional impact entirely. She tried new ideas, sometimes failing and sometimes discovering a nuance that made the music come alive. Each success boosted her confidence, while each failure became a lesson she embraced without discouragement. Her mentor continued to guide her, offering suggestions on phrasing and dynamics, helping her grow not just as a pianist but as an artist. The impact of her music became evident in small moments. During a practice at home, her younger sibling listened quietly, eyes wide, absorbing every note. A neighbor, passing by the open window, paused to enjoy the sound, smiling at the beauty of it. Even her mother sometimes wiped away a quiet tear, moved by the emotion that the girl's playing conveyed. These reactions reminded her that music was not only for personal satisfaction, but could also touch the hearts of others in profound ways. That realization strengthened her resolve to continue pursuing her passion. One afternoon, while preparing for another performance, the pianist faced an unexpected challenge. A piece she had been practicing for weeks suddenly felt more difficult than before. Her fingers hesitated, and she struggled to capture the emotion she wanted. Frustration rose, and for a brief moment, she wondered if she would ever master it. But then she remembered the lessons from previous recitals, the value of patience, persistence, and self-belief. She took a deep breath, slowed down, and approached the piece with fresh attention. Gradually, the music returned, more expressive and confident than before. She understood that challenges were not obstacles, but opportunities to grow and refine her skills. The day of her next performance brought both excitement and nervousness. This time, the audience included people she did not know at all, some who were experienced musicians or community figures. The venue was slightly larger, with a higher stage and brighter lights. She felt her stomach tighten as she approached, but she reminded herself that the music she played was her own voice, and that voice deserved to be heard. She sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and let her fingers find the keys. The first note rang out, and she felt the familiar calm begin to settle in. As she played, she became more aware of the audience's reaction. They leaned in, absorbed by the unfolding melody, responding subtly with their body language and expressions. The pianist realized that the connection she had established with her listeners was growing. Stronger. She was not just performing. She was communicating, sharing a part of herself that could not be expressed with words alone. Each crescendo, each gentle touch, each pause between notes carried meaning, and the audience seemed to feel the emotions she poured into the music. The piece reached its climax, requiring precision, strength, and emotional depth. Her fingers moved quickly and confidently, guided by years of practice and dedication. The music surged, filling the hall with energy and emotion. She felt every heartbeat, every breath, every tremor of excitement as part of the performance. In that moment, the pianist realized that she was fully present, fully alive, and fully connected to the music she loved. It was a sensation she had experienced before, but now it was deeper, more intense, and more meaningful. When the final note faded, the audience remained silent for a brief heartbeat, as if savoring the last echoes of her playing. Then the applause began, growing louder and more enthusiastic. Some people stood, others clapped vigorously, and the young pianist felt a surge of pride and gratitude. She smiled, her heart swelling with the knowledge that her dedication and passion had reached the hearts of those who listened. She realized that the impact of music was not just in the technical perfection of the performance, but in the emotions it evoked, the connections it created, and the moments of shared experience it produced. After the performance, people approached her with admiration and encouragement. Some spoke about the emotions they had felt. Others complimented her technique and expression. She listened, grateful and humble, understanding that the applause and praise were not the ultimate goal. The true reward was the knowledge that her music had touched lives, even in small ways, and that the emotions she had conveyed had resonated with others. Her mentor came up to her, smiling and saying quietly, "You are finding your voice, and it is beautiful." She nodded, feeling the truth of the words in every fiber of her being. Back at home, she reflected on the experiences of the past months. She thought about the growth she had experienced, the challenges she had overcome, and the lessons she had learned. She realized that her journey was not just about playing piano or performing in front of others. It was about discovering herself, understanding her emotions, and learning how to communicate with the world through music. Each recital, each practice session, and each small success had shaped her into a stronger, more confident, and more expressive musician. She continued to practice daily, exploring new pieces and refining her interpretation of familiar ones. She experimented with dynamics, tempo, and phrasing, discovering new ways to express emotion and tell a story through music. Each day brought small victories, moments of discovery, and deeper understanding. She embraced the challenges, knowing that they were opportunities to grow, and celebrated each success, no matter how small, as a step forward in her journey. Her impact extended beyond the audience. Friends, family, and community members began to recognize her dedication and talent, often seeking her out to hear her play or to ask for advice. She shared her knowledge willingly, remembering the guidance she had received from her mentor and from her mother. She realized that part of being a musician was not only performing, but also inspiring and supporting others who were discovering their own paths. Through these experiences, the young pianist developed resilience and maturity. She learned to face fear and uncertainty with courage, to embrace imperfection as part of growth, and to find joy in both practice and performance. She understood that music was not just about technical skill, but about emotion, connection, and the courage to share a part of oneself with others. These lessons became a guiding force, shaping her decisions, her attitude, and her approach to both music and life. Even in quiet moments alone at her piano, she felt the profound impact of her journey. She reflected on the first timid steps she had taken, the hours of practice, the nervous anticipation before performances, and the moments of triumph that followed. Each experience had contributed to her growth, building not only her skill as a pianist but also her confidence, empathy, and understanding of the power of music. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the support of her family, mentor, and community, knowing that their encouragement had been instrumental in her progress. The young pianist's journey continued to evolve. With each new performance, each new piece learned, and each new audience touched, she grew not only as a musician, but as a person. She embraced the challenges, celebrated the successes, and found joy in the process of creating and sharing music. Her passion for the piano remained steadfast, and her understanding of its power deepened with every experience. She knew that the journey would continue, filled with new opportunities, lessons, and moments of connection. And she welcomed each one with an open heart and a determined spirit. As she sat alone in her practice room, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating the keys, she played a familiar melody with new depth and emotion. Each note carried her experiences, her growth, and her determination to continue sharing her story through music. She understood that her journey was far from over, but she felt confident in her ability to face the future, knowing that her passion, dedication, and love for music would guide her every step of the way. In that quiet moment, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that her music had the power to inspire, to connect, and to transform both herself and those who listened. The young pianist woke early, feeling the familiar flutter of excitement in her chest. This day was different from any she had faced before. She had been invited to perform at a special event in the city, a stage larger than any she had seen, with an audience she could only imagine. The thought of playing for so many people filled her with both anticipation and nervousness. Yet, she felt ready, strengthened by the journey that had brought her this far. Every recital, every challenge, and every long hour of practice had prepared her for this moment. She spent the morning practicing gently, her fingers moving over the familiar keys with care and confidence. She focused not on perfection, but on the story she wanted to tell through her music. Each note, each pause, each subtle change in rhythm carried meaning. She reminded herself that the audience would respond not just to her skill, but to the emotion she shared. With this thought, she felt a calm determination settle over her, quieting the nervous energy in her mind. The journey to the city was filled with reflections on her growth. She thought about the first recital, when she had trembled with nerves and discovered the joy of sharing music with others. She remembered the second performance, where she had faced self-doubt and learned resilience. She thought about all the small victories and challenges that had shaped her as a musician and as a person. With each memory, she felt more grounded and prepared for the task ahead. She knew that the experience was not just about performing, but about connecting with people, sharing emotion, and telling her story through music. Upon arriving at the venue, the scale of the space made her heart race. The stage was grand, with polished wood floors and bright lights. The audience was beginning to fill the seats, a sea of faces waiting to hear the music she would create. Backstage, she observed other performers, some practicing quietly, some speaking nervously to companions. She felt the familiar tug of anxiety, but she reminded herself that music had always been her refuge, her companion, and her voice. Taking a deep breath, she focused on the keys she would play and the story she wanted to share. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage, each step deliberate and steady. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience clearly, but she sensed their presence, their curiosity, and their anticipation. She approached the piano and sat down, letting her hands hover over the keys. For a brief moment, silence enveloped her. She closed her eyes, visualizing the melody, the emotion, and the connection she wished to create. Then she began, the first note resonating clearly, filling the space with sound. As she played, she became fully immersed in the music. Her fingers moved with confidence, guided by years of practice, countless hours of patience, and the deep connection she had developed with the piano. Each passage flowed naturally, each chord carried meaning, and the dynamics shifted with the emotion she poured into the performance. She was not merely playing. She was telling a story, one that had been written by her experiences, her struggles, and her triumphs. The audience responded subtly, leaning in, absorbing every note, and feeling the emotion she shared. Midway through the piece, she reached a particularly complex section that demanded both precision and passion. Her heart raced, her fingers flew across the keys, but her focus never wavered. She felt the music guiding her, helping her navigate the difficulty with grace and fluidity. She remembered the lessons learned from previous performances, the importance of staying present, embracing imperfection, and trusting the process. Each mistake, each hesitation, was part of the journey, and she continued with quiet confidence, letting the music speak for her. The crescendo approached, and she felt a surge of energy and emotion. The room seemed to vibrate with the sound, the audience captivated by the intensity of her playing. She imagined each person feeling the story she conveyed, sensing the struggles and joys that had brought her to this moment. Her performance was no longer just about her. It was about the shared experience, the connection created through music. Every note, every pause, every delicate touch of the keys carried her presence into the hearts of those listening. As the final passage approached, she played with all her remaining energy and focus. The music soared, powerful and expressive, filling the hall with a richness that resonated deeply. She felt a sense of liberation, as if every emotion she had held inside for years had finally found its voice. The audience remained silent for a heartbeat, absorbing the last notes, and then erupted into applause. The sound was overwhelming, yet deeply satisfying. She smiled, tears of joy and relief welling in her eyes. She had shared herself fully and honestly, and the response reflected the impact of her dedication and passion. After stepping off the stage, people came forward to congratulate her. Some spoke about the emotions they had felt. Others complimented her technical skill and expression. She listened, humbled and grateful, understanding that the recognition was not the goal, but the affirmation of a journey lived with commitment and heart. Her mentor came forward, quietly acknowledging her growth and the beauty of her performance. She felt a sense of completion, knowing that she had reached a milestone, yet aware that the journey continued, filled with new opportunities and challenges. Back at home, she reflected on the experience. She thought about the years of practice, the moments of doubt, the small victories that had shaped her. She realized that every step had been meaningful, contributing to her growth as a musician and as a person. She felt gratitude for the support of her family, for the guidance of her mentor, and for the opportunities to share her music with others. The journey had not been easy, but it had been rich with lessons, resilience, and joy. She continued to practice, exploring new pieces and refining her interpretations. She experimented with expression, dynamics, and tempo, discovering new ways to convey emotion and tell stories through music. Each day brought progress, small victories, and moments of discovery. She embraced challenges as opportunities to learn, understanding that growth came through effort, patience, and persistence. Her love for the piano and for music remained unwavering, strengthened by every experience and every performance. The impact of her music extended beyond the stage. Friends, family, and members of her community were inspired by her dedication and passion. Some sought her out to hear her play, others to learn from her experience. She shared her knowledge willingly, remembering the guidance she had received and wanting to encourage others in their own journeys. Through music, she built connections, inspired confidence, and offered a voice to emotions that words could not express. As the young pianist looked toward the future, she felt a sense of purpose and determination. She understood that the path ahead would continue to present challenges, but she was ready to face them. She had learned to navigate fear, embrace imperfection, and express herself fully through music. Each performance, each practice session, each new experience contributed to her growth and deepened her connection with her craft. She felt confident that she could continue to evolve, touch hearts, and tell meaningful stories through her piano. In quiet moments alone at her piano, she found solace and inspiration. The familiar keys welcomed her, carrying the echoes of past performances and the promise of future ones. She played with intention and heart, exploring new pieces, revisiting old favorites, and discovering her own unique voice. Music had become more than a skill. It was a language through which she could express her feelings, connect with others, and create moments of beauty and understanding. It was both a refuge and a bridge to the world. The young pianist's journey had reached a point of fulfillment, yet she knew it was far from complete. She had experienced the thrill of performing, the challenges of growth, and the joy of connecting through music. She had learned valuable lessons about perseverance, expression, and resilience. She had discovered the power of sharing her story and the impact of her dedication. With these insights, she felt equipped to continue her journey, embracing each new opportunity with courage, passion, and heart. As she practiced alone that evening, the glow of the lamp casting soft shadows over the keys, she reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the nervous little girl who first sat at a small piano, the first recitals, the moments of doubt and triumph. She felt gratitude for every experience, understanding that each had shaped her into the musician and person she had become. She smiled quietly, feeling a sense of completeness and anticipation for the future. She knew that her music would continue to grow, evolve, and inspire. Each note she played carried not only her skill but her story, her emotions, and her connection to the world. She felt ready to face whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead, knowing that her passion, dedication, and love for music would guide her. The journey of the young pianist was ongoing, filled with promise, growth, and the enduring power of music to touch hearts, transform moments, and tell stories that words alone could not convey. In that quiet room, she played on, smiling as the music carried her forward, fully alive, fully herself, and ready for whatever came next.